Welcome to Vegan Business Talk with Katrina Fox, author of Vegan Ventures, Start and Grow an Ethical Business. Hello and welcome to episode 141 of Vegan Business Talk. I'm Katrina Fox, journalist, author and PR consultant and founder of Vegan Business Media, a content events and training platform providing success strategies and resources for vegan business owners and entrepreneurs. Firstly, a quick announcement. I get a lot of people contacting me asking how they can work with me. So this is a little plug to let you know that I offer a range of services to vegan and plant-based business owners and entrepreneurs. From online training and group coaching to PR, content creation and copywriting services, and one-on-one tailored individual private consultations. So if you're wanting help to promote or grow your vegan business, brand, product, service, book, or other creative project, head over to veganbusinessmedia.com and click on the Work With Me menu link for more details. Now for the main part of the show. In this episode, I interview Grace Regan, founder of SpiceBox, a vegan curry house in London, UK. Grace is a serial entrepreneur who cut her teeth in the tech world with her first startup, Clip It News. In 2015, she won a place on a top Silicon Valley accelerator and moved to California, where she became vegan. Disillusioned by the tech world, Grace moved back to London and started SpiceBox from her home kitchen. She quickly fell into the world of street food, trading at markets and festivals across the UK, and was named a Young British Foodie Street Food finalist. With a mission to bring a fresh, modern spin on the Great British Curry House, Grace opened the first SpiceBox vegan curry house in Walthamstow in northeast London in January 2019. Recently, she completed a round of investment to scale the concept in commuter towns around London. SpiceBox raised over £850,000, which included a Seeders equity crowdfunding campaign. The company, which also implements a number of sustainability initiatives, including being powered 100% by renewable energy, reached profit within 6 weeks of opening. In this interview, Grace discusses why she left Silicon Valley, despite gaining success with her tech startup, to move into plant-based hospitality in the UK, why she chose Walthamstow, which is not known as a vegan-friendly area, to open her first curry house, how she raised £850,000 in investment despite getting a lot of no's and having no experience in the restaurant business, why she doesn't promote the business as being vegan, and much more. Here's the interview with Grace Regan from SpiceBox. Hello, Grace. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Katrina.
No, it's really interesting to have you because you've got, everyone I speak to, everyone has an interesting story, but I find yours, perhaps a little bit extra interesting, and you can talk to us a little bit about that in a moment. But first of all, I would like to know, as I ask all my guests, the very first question is your why. So why? What's the why? What's the purpose and the reason behind your business, which is the UK's first vegan curry house, I believe?
I suppose the why is based on the fact that I think if everyone ate a little less meat and dairy, then our footprint on this world and our impact on the environment would be less, which in my view is a good thing. So I think that's mainly where I'm coming from.
Right, got it.
So I'm all about encouraging people who aren't necessarily vegan to eat more veg.
Yeah, got it. Fantastic. So talk us through a little bit how you got there, because I believe that you were actually in the tech world and you were in Silicon Valley for a while, in California, and then you've come back to London. So you've sort of gone from Silicon Valley to Walthamstow, which for our international readers is a place in the northeast of London. And quite different from Silicon Valley in California. So
Indeed.
tell us a little bit about how you got there and why you made that switch.
Yeah, sure. So to give you the kind of the history, I studied English at university, and at university I did a lot of student radio. I edited some student magazines, and broadcasting and media was always something I really wanted to get into. When I left university, I had no plans, no job lined up, but I got approached by a mutual friend who had this idea for an audio news app. And he was looking for someone with an interest in audio content, editing and media to kind of start the business with him. So I thought it'd be a great thing to do. So jumped straight in, and about 2 years down the line, we had a team of about 20 people. We'd raised investment, and we'd created this short form audio news app called Clip It. I was running the newsroom, in charge of all the content, and things were going super well. And one thing led to another, and I got invited to join a Silicon Valley tech startup accelerator, which for anyone in the kind of startup space, tech space, like it's an opportunity that you can't really turn down.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I decided to move to California and join this accelerator in Silicon Valley, and lived in California for a bit. And while I was in California, I turned vegan, as you do. So before in London, I'd been vegetarian for a long time, tried to go vegan in London. This was about 5 years ago now, and just found it really hard, quite depressing, couldn't really go out much. There was just nothing like the offering that there is today. So I'd given it up, but once I got to California, there was no excuse really. And it was just at the beginning of kind of what we'd call this kind of second wave of veganism. And there was just so many exciting vegan food businesses opening, really cool vegan street food markets in San Francisco and LA. And yeah, I got totally swept up in that. Learned a lot more about, the implication of our diet on the environment, and obviously the ethical implications of eating meat and dairy. So I became more and more passionate about, the cause of veganism. And at the same time had kind of lost interest in what I was doing in Silicon Valley. I'd been somewhat disillusioned by the whole tech world. It's quite a strange place, Silicon Valley. I don't know if you know it.
No, I don't. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Why were you disillusioned? What made you disillusioned with it?
Well, it's kind of, I would say at its best, Silicon Valley is a place where some like very intelligent driven people are working on some of the, solutions to some big problems in the world. And that's great. But there's also a lot of people who are perhaps coming up with problems that don't necessarily exist, raising a lot of money and, for no real reason, in my opinion. And there's a lot of hot air there. There's a lot of egos. And it's just something that didn't quite sit right with me. And, at the same time, my business had changed quite a lot from what it was originally, which was all about connecting young people with important current affairs. And it was more focused on kind of scale and automation. And it just wasn't something that resonated particularly with me.
Yeah.
Okay. So at the same time as I was kind of losing interest in that, I was obviously getting far more interested in the vegan space, the vegan food space, to be precise. I'd grown up cooking, really into food. And I'd always had this kind of idea for SpiceBox, which I'm sure we can come on to, like in the back of my mind. And one thing led to another, and I knew it was the time to stop what I was doing and enter a career in hospitality.
Wow, that's fascinating. I love hearing people's stories because, on the face of it, when your publicist got in touch and said, she was in Silicon Valley in the tech world. And for a lot of people, like, it sounds so glamorous, like that's like, people's dreams. And then to do that, but then, it's kind of interesting. Everybody's different. And like you say, sometimes your interests can change. And I love how you've completely, I suppose the buzzword of 2020 is pivot. You've really kind of done that. and made a success of it and followed your passion. So I really like that, because it shows you don't have to be locked into something. And sometimes, we do sort of lose interest, or something changes and we end up doing something else. So I think that's fantastic. So we'll certainly, we'll get on to talking about the SpiceBox. So tell us about, first of all, I was going to ask you this a bit later, but I've got to ask it now, because I keep seeing you having written your autobiography and having that title From Silicon Valley to Walthamstow. It's just making me chuckle. First of all, tell me why Walthamstow? Why did you start with this? Because it's not the most, because I'm from the UK originally, even though I live in Sydney, Australia. I'm from UK. London's my hometown. I go back, quite often. And so don't really think of Walthamstow as being a particularly vegan friendly kind of area. So I'm curious initially why you chose that area.
Right. So I think probably in order to get to the answer to that question, it's worth me kind of, explaining a bit more about what SpiceBox is and how I came up with the idea.
Sure.
So I said I'd had the idea. So while I was working on Clipit, which was the tech company, I'd had this idea of like, why isn't there a kind of fresh, modern spin on the classic British high street curry house? And that was kind of out of my own frustration of not being able to find, Indian food that I had grown up eating and had eaten in India. I couldn't find that in London, despite the fact that there are a lot of Indian restaurants in London and curry houses. And so just to give some context of that, like my great aunt is Indian. So I grew up eating her home cooked food. I traveled to India extensively and like had always had this like huge passion for Indian culture and cuisine. And so that kind of idea I was playing around with that idea in the back of my mind for a few years. And then when I became vegan and was in California, I realized that like Indian food is such a great way to introduce people to plant-based food, because even if you're like an ardent meat eater, the concept of like a vegetarian or a vegan curry is not that scary. A lot of people, like, maybe their one vegetarian meal a week is likely to be some form of kind of curry or stew. So I knew that there was a really great kind of entry point into vegan cuisine for a lot of people. And then also like the Indian food market in the UK is huge. I mean, it's famously our kind of the national dish is chicken tikka masala. But I also saw quite a big opportunity because it's a huge market, but there's no like real brand that dominates that, especially on the kind of the curry house space. So all of these things kind of came together, and that's what made me think, okay, it's now or never that I've got to move back to London and do this. And so we're unapologetically a local curry house brand. So I know you've got quite an international audience, but essentially in the UK, you can find what we call curry houses on high streets in pretty much every town across the UK. And they serve what can be described as kind of British Indian food. So it's very much like a British take on like Indian recipes and cooking. And it's almost kind of its own cuisine in its own right. And I really wanted to take that. So we're not we don't profess to be a truly authentic traditional Indian restaurant. We're very much like just a bit of a modern spin on that kind of classic high street British curry house. So I knew that we needed to be somewhere where you would traditionally find like a local curry house. And that's usually in like a residential area, a small town. It's not in the city centre. And it's where people live, because essentially people have curry in the UK on like, let's say a Friday or a Saturday night when they're at the home, they'll get an Indian takeaway or they go out for a curry. So central London was just not on the cards. And also because rent is unbelievably expensive in central London. I just wasn't interested in paying those kind of rents. So I was looking for like, a residential part of London that had quite a small town community feel to it. And Walthamstow really is that. Like, it's quite unique, and in terms of like London neighbourhoods, it does feel like you're almost in a town. It's got such a great sense of community. A really diverse group of people live there, and to me, it just felt like the perfect testing ground for SpiceBox and where we should open first, especially in terms of like target market, etc. We are still really trying to kind of figure out exactly who our target market was. and
Right.
also had such a good mix of loads of different types of people, demographics, age groups, etc.
Got it. Great. Now, thank you for sharing that, because I think particularly with a business like yours, which has got physical, a location, then location itself is super important. So I think
Yeah.
it's good that you explained that. So that's brilliant. So tell us about some of the key challenges when you first started out with SpiceBox, because I understand you initially started out as a street food stall, and then fairly recently you've actually opened a physical restaurant. So tell us about what some of the challenges when you first started out.
Yeah, so when I moved back to the UK, I just started cooking in my home kitchen, testing recipes, developing the menu, and then eventually I basically turned my home into an Indian takeaway. So I built a table that fit into my doorway, and I just sell Indian takeaway from my front door, and also via various delivery partners. So those early days, it was really it was me by myself cooking in my kitchen and selling it by night. And then eventually I got a stall in a London street food market. And from there went on to trade at street food markets across the UK and also festivals across the UK. And those early days, they were incredibly tough because it was me on my own, really doing a job that, for anyone is incredibly hard. I mean, I would say that street food is one of the hardest jobs in hospitality for sure, like in terms of the hours, the pure physicality of it, the lifestyle that comes with it. It's tough, but it's such a great way to learn about how to build a food business. And that's basically what I did. I had to learn from scratch. I had no experience. So, I mean, challenges were, they're everything from learning how to scale up recipes to feed 4 people to 1,000 people. I had to learn that pretty quickly. I had to learn about how to run a commercial kitchen, how to employ and train chefs and street food front of house staff, and kind of keep going, essentially. When I'd come back from a freezing cold, rainy day on a market, having sold next to nothing, finding that drive and motivation to just keep going the next day, that was a real challenge, but worth it in the end.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I understand that you fairly recently opened a permanent physical location. And now, of course, we've got the whole COVID-19 coronavirus, which is impacting hospitality and restaurants in a big way. So how is that impacting your business at the moment? And what are you doing to sort of, I guess, make the best of the situation?
Yeah, so we opened our first permanent curry house in January 2019. So we're just over a year old.
Okay.
In terms of the COVID-19 situation, I mean, obviously it's impacted the hospitality industry. I mean, not just in the UK, but worldwide significantly. We had to legally shut down our dine-in about 3 weeks ago now. But one thing that, we're incredibly fortunate that we're still trading. We're doing delivery and takeaway, contact-free takeaway. Obviously, completely shut off the dine-in element, and so far it's working really well. Like, we're still busy, we're still employing a team. Our guests are still being fed in Walthamstow, and I suppose that's by virtue of us being located in a residential area. A lot of people are at home at the moment. And also, we're Indian food, and we're a curry house, and so takeaway and delivery for Indian food is something that customers are really familiar with, and our food travels really well. So, I feel very lucky to be a hospitality business that is still trading right now.
Yeah, brilliant. It's interesting, isn't it, how it's impacting different people in different ways. So that's good to hear. So in terms of your growth, so how did you know that you were ready to move from doing the street stall type business to actually opening a permanent location? Because I know you said it's really hard doing the street stall stuff, and I can imagine it is, like you said, with the antisocial hours, the constantly moving, stock in and out, etc., and traveling to all the different places. But it's also quite a commitment to open a physical store where you've got the rent and all the other things that come with it. So I'm curious, how did you know you were ready to make that transition?
So, I mean, that transition, it was always my intention when I started SpiceBox that we'd be a kind of a bricks and mortar curry house, and street food almost happened by accident. So from day one, it was always my objective to get to the point where I could open a permanent site. for the route I chose was raising investment. So throughout the time of doing street food, I was pitching to investors, writing business plans, etc., really trying to focus on the future vision of SpiceBox. And so once we'd closed that investment, that's when, financially we were ready. By then I'd had about 2 years of experience in the food industry, and you're never really ready to take the next step, but it's one I knew I had to take, and you kind of make yourself ready. So I made sure that, I hired quite early on. I hired someone with far more experience in hospitality than me, who really helped me build the business. And you just got to keep learning and keep being willing to grow and develop as and when you need to.
I love what you said there about, you're never really ready and you just got to make yourself ready. I think that's great. That's a little, maybe a tweeter, something you can tweet. That was a nice little, little saying there. So you talked about funding and investment. So that's interesting, because I know a lot of investors don't necessarily want to invest just in one single restaurant. And so I was going to ask you at the end what your long-term vision for yourself and the brand is, and maybe you can either answer that now or later, but can you talk us a little bit through that investment process? So, and I know you obviously had experience with this, you were in the tech world, but I'm just curious as to your experience with pitching. So, what type of investors were you pitching? Talk us a little bit through what you did and how you managed to get successful investment.
Sure. So, I'll start out by saying that raising money for a food and hospitality brand is really challenging. It's especially challenging in the UK and in London. And having come from tech, it was a real rude awakening for me, because, as you kind of perhaps alluded to, it's not a particularly sexy investment proposition, especially early stage, because a lot of restaurants fail and it's quite a risky industry. But I knew, I was incredibly sure that I was building something that had long-term value, and I could kind of see beyond that. And so the process was, like I had been through, and with my previous business, it was about writing a business plan, thinking about, the 5-10 year plan, doing financial forecasts, building a deck, and then just slowly building up a kind of network of people who may be able to introduce you to someone who maybe knows someone who might be interested in investing. So it was just constant kind of reaching out to people, meeting them for coffee, talking to them about the business, seeing if they knew anyone who could offer advice, or perhaps knew someone who might be interested. So yeah, it was quite a slow process. I had a lot of no's, but you've just got to keep going. And if you really believe in what you're building and that comes across, then eventually you will get to the point where you meet the right investor. And, lucky for me, I did.
So were you doing all this while you were doing the street stall? So you waited to get investment before you actually opened your physical restaurant?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting. Cool. No, that's really good. Because investors are very kind of, they're so different, and I think I like what you said, that you just kind of got to keep opening those doors, and that you got a lot of no's. I think that's helpful to know. Was it useful for you, do you think, having had that experience of getting investment previously, or did it not really make any difference because it was such a different sector?
It was useful in the sense that it gave me the confidence to even go out and raise money. I think it would have been a lot harder for me to believe that I could do it if I hadn't been through that process before. So I think, and a lot of pitching and talking to investors it's pure confidence. It's knowing your stuff, coming across really positively to people, because essentially they're investing in you, more so than the business. So in that regard, it was. But then obviously, I'm more than willing to admit I had very little experience in hospitality. I really didn't know much about that space. So that's where it was challenging. But essentially, when you're raising money, the person that's potentially going to invest in you, they just want to know, are you going to be the person that can drive the business forward? And do you know the fundamentals of kind of building a business? And do you have that kind of passion and graft? So it did help, but it wasn't a surefire way that I was going to get investment. I'd done it before.
Got it. Like that. Cool. So in terms of, now I know you mentioned when you first started out, you weren't sure exactly who your market would be. So this kind of leads me into my next question, which is about the use of the word vegan in your marketing materials or on your website, and the prominence of it, whether you use the word vegan, do you use plant-based, do you, not use it, either of those. So tell us a little bit about your choice of whether vegan or plant-based.
Yeah, so we don't really scream and shout about being a vegan food business, and that's quite intentional. I mentioned at the beginning that, like, I'm in this to help encourage people to eat slightly more vegetables, essentially. And so it's not my mission to try and turn the world vegan. It's about me showing people how delicious and accessible vegan food can be. And so I knew that if I defined our brand by being vegan, then it could potentially put off some people who otherwise would have really enjoyed our food and what we stand for and coming to eat with us. And that's really kind of the thinking behind us. It's not on our menu. It's not on our shop front. It's not really in the forefront of our brand messaging. And to me, that's really worked, because most of our guests in our curry house, we have regulars that come back, every week. And I would say 80% of our guests aren't fully vegan.
Right.
To me, that's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And so many times when I'm, in the curry house and I'm talking to guests, and they'll say, I had no idea I was coming to a vegan restaurant. I wouldn't have come, but now I've eaten it. I'm going to come back again and again. I'm going to bring all my friends here. People eat our chicken tikka masala, which was made from soy-based chicken, not even knowing that it's not chicken.
Oh, interesting. I was going to ask you if you did that kind of thing. So you do use the plant-based meats. You don't tell people that
we do plant-based meats. I mean, we call it chicken, CHICKN.
Yeah.
But that's pretty subtle. And I mean, yeah, and we even have some people bringing their kids to come and eat, because they feel like they've discovered the cool new vegan restaurant that their kids don't know about, and that kind of thing is just it's so great. And essentially what I want to be known for is just a really great curry house that serves amazing food, regardless of if it's vegan or not.
Great. No, I love that. I like hearing, because there's no right or wrong. People often say to me, oh, should I use it? Should I not? Kind of thing. And I think there's no right or wrong answer. It really is down to the individual business. So I like hearing how things are working or otherwise. So that's great. So what are some of your current marketing strategies do you use that you find most effective? Because as I say, you've been going for a little while now. You've had your permanent location for a year, and it sounds like you've been working really, really hard, doing all the stuff of working in your business. But at the same time, you've also got to kind of build that brand and market. So talk us through some of your marketing strategies.
So our predominant piece of marketing that we do is essentially social media. That's all. We don't do any paid digital marketing, but we put quite a lot of time and effort and energy into our social media. Mainly Instagram. We're also focusing a lot on YouTube this year. So we've put out season 1, and we've just put out season 2, the start of season 2 on SpiceBox TV, which is our YouTube channel. And that's all around kind of showing people how to make some of our dishes at home. And I think in terms of the Walthamstow site, something that was super effective was that we launched a pop-up in a cafe before we opened the permanent curry house. And that was such a good way of not only kind of really testing the operations and the menu and the food and training the team, but also starting to build a name for ourselves organically within the community. And that's something that we've always kind of really focused on, hyper local marketing, because like I said, we're a local neighborhood restaurant. So as long as everyone in that neighborhood knows we exist, we're not too concerned with people beyond that. Anything beyond that is an added bonus. We also really kind of keen on partnering with brands that we feel kind of share our values, particularly other local small businesses and brands. So we work with a local brewery on one of our own label beers. We have an amazing oat milk company based down the road who we work a lot with. We've done quite a few kind of brand partnerships for specials on our menu, etc. And that really helps us kind of tap into other audiences. And then we also, in terms of paid marketing, the only thing that I'd say we really did paid-wise would be PR. I think PR for a food business, a restaurant business in London is pretty key. We're really lucky to get a lot of organic PR at the beginning, especially when it was just me.
Yeah, well, especially because you're a first of a kind,
helps.
and that's a useful tip. I always say, because I've got an online PR course, and I always say to people, if you can be the first of your kind in any way, that can often get media interest. It certainly pricked up my ears when, I got sent the pitch. And I thought, oh, okay, it's a first. Okay, that sounds interesting. So, that's great. Good.
Yeah.
Good. So, just as we wrap up, tell us a little bit about what have you learned? What have been you would say the key lessons that you've learned through running your business, and any tips that you would like to share from anyone considering perhaps leaving? Well, maybe not right now when we're in the middle of the pandemic, but for whenever people might want to perhaps leave their job and become self-employed, because it is very different, isn't it? Working for somebody else and running your own business.
I think in terms of kind of tips and things I've learned along the way, I mean, you're never going to know it all or kind of be good enough. It's an incredibly, it's a hard thing running your business. But I think the most important thing is to constantly go into things with like a growth mindset. So even if you don't know too much about like the area of the business that you're working on, maybe on that day, it's about going in with an open mind and just being willing to learn and develop. And that also, alongside that, comes like the willingness to put your hands up, admit when either you've made a mistake or when you don't know things. But I'm a real believer in just being super honest about when you don't know things, because that's when you really open yourself up to learning, growing and developing. And also you meet amazing people who know a lot more about things than you do, and you can learn from them. So I think as long as you go in with this kind of growth mindset and honesty, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, no, I got that. That's wonderful. That's very good advice, actually. And I think it's kind of, because there's another buzzword that's going around, it's been going around for a little while, is authenticity. But people do want that. I think they're tired of brands, kind of putting up a facade. They actually, tend to warm to you if they, know a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes and where you're just being honest and upfront. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah.
So finally, talk us through a little bit about your long-term vision for yourself and your brand, because I know you said you've got an investor. I doubt, could correct me wrong, I'd be surprised if an investor is investing in solely one single restaurant. It sounds like you've got some plans maybe to have, I don't know, your version of SpiceBoxes in different locales, or tell us a little bit about your future plans.
Yeah, so I mean, the vision has always been to kind of be the UK's leading curry house brand, and who knows, maybe the world. We've got international ambitions as well.
Nice.
But so, I mean, like short term, we're looking at opening a second curry house. Obviously, those plans have had to be put on hold for now until this whole pandemic is out of the way. So that's kind of, we really want to open more sites. We're also beginning to work on a retail range. So looking how people can bring the SpiceBox experience home. And then also the media side of things. So like I said, we've got this YouTube channel, and we've got some exciting projects that we're working on that I can't talk about now, but along in that kind of space. So we're looking at quite a kind of broad approach, and really looking to kind of build a brand that helps communicate the kind of values that we stand for.
I love that. And I must say, on a personal level, I'm really happy to hear about this, because I know because I've been vegan for 24 years now. And so I used to love eating Indian food, but of course, a lot of it is cooked in ghee. So even though a lot of the dishes were meat free, if they were cooked in ghee, there was still, a lot that I couldn't eat. So I quite miss a nice sort of, vegan Indian curry. So I love the fact that you're doing this, and I hope you do go international and come to Sydney. Next time I'm in London, I will. I'll have to go up to Walthamstow. I haven't been there in a long time, and check it out. But that's wonderful. I'm very glad to hear about what you're up to, and I'm glad things are going well, even during these very, very strange times. You shared some absolutely great tips, Grace. I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Katrina.
So that was Grace Regan from SpiceBox. You can find out more at eatspicebox.co.uk. And that link is on the show notes page at veganbusinessmedia.com/podcasts and going to episode 141. Now for some vegan business news highlights. British vegan dessert company The Collaborative, previously known as the Coconut Collaborative, raised $7 million in investment this month. That's April 2020, if you're listening in the future, reports Veg News. The investment round was led by Powerplant Ventures. The company, which currently makes plant-based yogurts, also appointed a new CEO, Mickey Tolman, who brings 15 years' experience working at hummus giant Sabra Dipping Company. The collaborative was founded in 2014 in the UK by twin brothers Edward and James Averdeek and launched into the US market in 2018. It plans to offer additional vegan desserts, including rice pudding and chocolate mousse. So this is really good news, particularly with the timing. While some investors have hit the pause button on new ventures due to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, others are continuing to support vegan and plant-based businesses. Impossible Foods closed a $500 million investment round last month, and vegan chicken nugget startup Rebellious Foods raised $6 million this month. And for a list of vegan and vegan-friendly investors and how to get in touch to pitch them, you can find that on the Vegan Business Media website in a blog post called How to Find an Investor for Your Vegan Business. And there's a link to that on the show notes page for this episode. A free online summit for vegan and plant-based business owners has just launched, and I'm delighted to be part of it. The Plant-Based Business Summit is a fantastic virtual event hosted by my good friend Ron Gandiza, who's gathered 30 experts to share tips and strategies on all facets of running a vegan or plant-based business. It includes vision and goal planning, raising the visibility of your brand, how to raise funds, how to make sales, and more. Ron is an extraordinary and hard-working entrepreneur and collaborator who's passionate about sharing the plant-based lifestyle in a positive way. Last year, he launched the Plant-Based Network, a lifestyle and entertainment TV network which has tripled its viewership recently, with several 100,000 people tuning in via Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and on the website. The free online Plant-Based Business Summit runs from the 22nd of April to the 21st of May, and again that's 2020 if you're listening in the future, and will also be broadcast on the Plant-Based Network. It features one expert interview a day over the 30-day period, so it's nice and manageable for you. If you sign up and register, you'll have the opportunity to also get recordings and transcripts of the interviews. Now, this is a brilliant resource for vegan entrepreneurs, particularly at this time, so I highly recommend that you register for it now, and there's a link to do that on the show notes page for this episode. So that's it for this episode of Vegan Business Talk. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you like the show, please give it a review on iTunes or whatever platform you're listening on, as it helps to get it seen by more people. There are more free resources on the veganbusinessmedia.com website to help you in your quest to build and sustain a successful business. And if you'd like to work with me personally on promoting and growing your vegan business or brand, you'll find details on how to do this on the website at veganbusinessmedia.com and clicking on the Work With Me menu link. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Vegan Business Talk. Bye for now.